I got this card for $57 and it's worth quite a bit more than that. The most recent were 242 and 209. Now the first one's a card that I tried to bid $15,000 on and actually lost. You usually don't see those for three figures. So when I set up my bid for this card, I actually didn't think I was going to win it at all. And then I won it for multiple hundreds of dollars less than I expected. Today, I'm walking you through some of the recent pickups and decisions I've made in the card market so you can get inside the mind of a 20-year sports card investor for a behind-the-scenes look at how decisions are made. I'll show you the $15,000 auction I lost, how I found hundreds of dollars of free money from a bad listing, what I'm grading now versus what I'm holding back, the MVP nobody's pricing in yet, and more. Let's dive right in. Now, the first one's a card that I tried to bid $15,000 on and actually lost. So it's this Tyrese Halliburton Black Prism 1/1 Rookie Signatures Auto PSA 10. So this was on Golden at auction, and I actually put in a bid earlier, got outbid, it went into extended bidding, and I tried to place another bid with about 10 seconds left, and I got the old spinning circle, and the bid never went through. And so I ended up losing this auction, even though I tried to bid $12K, which was about $15K after the buyer premium here. Not that I expect Ken Golden to be watching this video, but if you are, bro, fix your website. You would have made more money on this auction. But the reason I like this play specifically is it's a card that's super rare. Obviously, a 1/1 is one of his premier rookie cards, and he's the type of guy that's just been out of sight and out of mind for a really long time with the Achilles injury, coming off of the huge historic playoff run all the way to the finals. And I think that run put him on a lot of people's radar when he wasn't previously on a lot of people's radar. So this is the type of card that I anticipate will likely sell for more in the future than it did this time, and you might have an opportunity to flip even before the season starts, just based on the hype and the excitement of the new season approaching in a few months. We've also seen it over and over again that the best cards of the best players tend to have asymmetric upside, where they can rise significantly higher and faster than lesser cards of the same players. So unfortunately, this one didn't work out for me, but I do stand behind the reasoning still, and someone probably got a really good buy here. Now, since this one didn't work out, what I did do was I found a couple of other Halliburton cards here on COMC and made a couple of pickups of a Blue Prism PSA 10 and a Blue Ice Prism PSA 10. Both of these cards are rare. They're both low pop. They don't show up very often. So that gives me some control over pricing when I go to sell, because if someone wants the card, they're going to have to pay my price for it. And the other thing I like about these specifically is when you sell on COMC, you get store credit. And if you take the money for that, if you take the cash out option, there's a 10% fee. So anytime I can buy something that I would already be buying on COMC, great, I can save myself that 10% cash out fee and get more for my money. Another reason why I like this card specifically is if we look at the data here, we can see that the Silver Prism PSA 10 for Halliburton has actually climbed by 89% here over the past year. But when we look at the Blue Prism PSA 10 from that same set, the last sale was $665 about a year ago, and Card Ladder actually has it down a little bit since that sale, which makes no sense. It's only pop 11, so this is a really difficult grade. And when his Silver Prisms are up by 90% over the past year, but his blue hasn't moved, that's usually just a sign that it hasn't sold again. So this to me is a scenario where I think I'm getting really good value on this play. I did pay a little bit over $800 for this card, so I didn't get it for $665, but I did get it for less than what it should be worth in theory if the 90% growth from the Silver Prisms were to be translated to the Blue Prism and the Blue Ice. Now, it doesn't always work out perfectly. Sometimes certain parallels will rise more or less than others, but this is a scenario where I feel really confident in those plays because I like that I got good value on it. I like the time of year that I'm buying this card. I like Halliburton's upside just coming off of an injury where he's been out of sight, out of mind, and he's about to be back in the spotlight for the first time in a year. So there's already a lot of things to like about this, even if I was paying full market price, but to feel like I got a good deal on top of that just sweetens it that much more. Now, if you're interested in learning how to actually execute the seasonal swing strategy, I build a guide for each of the big three sports every year where I break down how the strategy works for that sport. And then I even include a list of the specific players that I'm personally targeting. If you want to check them out, you can grab your copy of the latest guides inside my card investing community Ignite. I'll leave a link in the description if that sounds at all interesting, but otherwise, let's get back to the video. All right, so the next one's a fun one. So the Shaquille O'Neal Metal Universe Nuts and Bolts PSA 10, I got this card for $57, and it's actually worth quite a bit more than that when you look at the recent sales. $90 trending up to $135, and then the most recent were $242 and $209. So how did I get this card for $57? Well, Shaquille was misspelled, Shaquille O'Neal. And it also doesn't have the term nuts and bolts in the title, so you have this scenario where the name is misspelled and it's missing the set name, and that sometimes can lead to a card selling for cheaper than it should. So what I like about this one is it's a play where you can just get the card in the mail and flip it right away for a profit. You don't even have to get full market value when you're getting this steep of a discount. I call this the quick flip strategy. I know, super creative, right? But this is what I did a lot of when I was brand new in the market and didn't have a big bankroll to work with, because you can create profits when you make the purchase where you're virtually guaranteeing the profit by buying at such a steep discount, and you can really build up your bankroll that way. Now, this isn't the most time-effective way to approach the card market, so if you have more time than money, this is great, but if you have more money than time, I'd actually recommend other strategies instead. I don't actively look for these deals myself anymore, but I do stumble onto them now and then, and I'm always interested in free money if I can find some. All right, this next one is one that I was actually really excited to see show up at auction, that when it did show up, I was certain that I was going to buy it, and then I ended up passing anyway. So I want to walk you through the decision here, but this Leaf 97 Statistical Standouts Ken Griffey Jr. PSA 10. So this is just a cool, fun insert from the 90s. These are actually really cool cards where they kind of like fold open if you have one that's not graded here. But this is tough to find these days. The set's almost 30 years old, and these are the exact types of cards that are going crazy right now for the key players from the 90s. And I was thinking market value for this would be 11 or 1200 bucks, and that if I bid about 1350, I'd probably have a good chance to take this one down. But as the end of the auction came closer and closer, it kept climbing higher and higher, and it ultimately said, I've got to have some discipline here. I'm going to pass on this one. And the reason why is because this is a pop 56, so there aren't that many PSA 10s, but if you look at the actual grading data here, it's a 46% gem rate from a card that's from 1997, which is actually really high. You'll find some present day cards that don't even have a 46% gem rate, much less something that's almost 30 years old. And when you look at the grade distribution, so there's 56 10s out of the 121 total cards graded, but there are also 49s. So 96 out of the 121 total cards have either gotten a 9 or a 10. There aren't that many lower grades. And that suggests to me that this card was very cleanly manufactured, and there's probably a good chance that I can find a raw one to get graded myself if I'm just a little bit more patient. So if we look at some of the actual sales, here's that 1648, but raw ones are only going for 450. Here's an 8 for 400. Here's a 9 for 690. Another pair of 10s for 1300 and 1100. Another raw for 400. But the other thing I like about this is because there are so many that are either 10s or 9s, you can also win on a 9 on this card if we look at some of the recent sales. So if you find one raw for 400 bucks and you can get it graded and it's suddenly worth 1500 plus as a 10, hey, that's a big win. But even if it gets a 9, you can get almost $700 for a 9 on one of these. That's not a bad play, even at the $80 per card grading level. So while my initial investment thesis on this card was, hey, I just want to get some more exposure to the Griffey market in general on one of these rare inserts as a PSA 10, ultimately I decided I got to stay more disciplined here, and I think I can do better if I just buy raw to grade on this play. All right, the next one's a fun one because we have a couple of different paths to victory here. So I bought this Roman Anthony Mini Diamond Chrome Auto Redemption card. And what I like about this is his values are down right now because he's been hurt, so he's out of sight and out of mind. People typically don't want to spend big money on players that are on the shelf. And so you can end up getting a decent deal on some of the types of cards that normally would be selling for more if he was healthy right now. But he's also still a big name prospect, and he just hasn't really had a chance to prove himself yet. So I don't find it off-putting that a guy has an injury. That doesn't necessarily mean he's bad, it just means he's hurt. So we're eventually going to get to see what he can actually do. And in the meantime, this is a card that I plan to redeem and send off for grading. And typically this is a set that has a relatively strong gem rate. So we'll find out for this year if that pattern continues to hold. But if this is a card that gets a PSA 10, it likely goes from $450 of value to $1,200 to $1,500 plus very quickly. So I like the play for a couple of different reasons here. I think he's a buy low candidate to begin with, but then you've got the grading opportunity on top of that. So it's kind of like a two-pronged approach where we have multiple paths to victory. All right, the next one is just a straight grade and flip play for cash flow. So I am primarily a sports card investor, but I've been doing a lot more Pokemon grading lately because the skill of grading translates to all categories. And so if you can look at some of the numbers in the Pokemon market right now, the grading premiums are enormous on certain cards. So for example, I picked up a ton of these Mew number 114, the VMAX It is a card that I've been picking up for $15 to $20 ungraded. So what I'm doing here is I've got lots of these obviously, and so I'm cherry picking the ones that I'm most confident are going to get 10s. I really don't want to pay $80 for a 9, but a 10 makes me $100 even after that $80 grading fee. So I'm still sending those in. And then the ones that come in that aren't clean enough, I'll either flip raw if I don't think they have a real chance, or if they're borderline condition wise, those are the ones that I'm stockpiling and just saving until after PSA reopens the value levels, where I'll be able to take a chance on those for a smaller grading fee. And this is just one example. There are lots of cards that I'm doing this with right now. One of my favorites I've also got quite a few of here from the Pokemon space, but I'm actually not going to share this one right now because I don't want to compete with thousands of you for this card on eBay. So this one's all mine. All right, next one's a little bit of a different play. So this is more of a bet on the market itself. So I picked up this Dennis Rodman Metal Universe Championship PSA 10. So it went for $1,273. I was really excited to get this card just because I wanted one of these. Rodman's the man. I always loved him, loved how he just played his role and was the best possible version of his role that he could be, and certainly found a way to keep things interesting. But what I like about this card specifically is it's extremely difficult. It's pop 7. These cards are really prone to chipping in bad corners, so I don't expect too many more copies to hit the market as PSA 10s. And I'm almost certain I ended up overpaying on this card. It ended up jumping by $600 in the last 2 seconds of the auction. But if I wasn't happy to pay the price, I wouldn't have bid that price. So I'm looking at this as a long-term hold. It's a bet on the market. It's a bet on this type of card moving forward. And the other thing that I like about this one is Rodman stuff in general is picking up steam, especially as PSA 10s. You can see Card Ladder already has this one a little bit higher than what this auction sold for. And the other thing I like is when you look at the Jordan from this same set, $6,200, and Card Ladder has this one at $7,600 based on the growth in the Jordan market. So it's not to say that Rodman is ever going to be Jordan from a card standpoint. It's certainly not the case. But the Jordan is pop 92, the Rodman is pop 7, so there are far fewer of them. And just seeing the Jordan pricing proves that people are at least willing to pay big money for this set. So while I don't expect the Rodman to become a $7,500 card, I do think there's a path for this card to get to 2x or 3x of what I paid eventually. And part of the fun of cards is they're just cool. So in the meantime, I'll enjoy owning this one. All right, so a couple more here. So the next one's one I was excited to see at auction and ultimately ended up passing on. But I was looking at this Caleb Williams 2024 Prism Flashback Mojo Prism numbered out of 25 as a PSA 10. What I like about this is, first of all, Caleb Williams is on the rise in a big way moving toward the football season. And I still think with where we are in the calendar year, at least at the time of this recording, there is potentially a little bit more juice left to squeeze on his cards. But this is a pop 3, so it's rare. It's something that is low numbered at being out of 25. And so there's a lot to like from a rarity standpoint. And typically rare cards let us have more influence over the price, because if you want this card, there's only 3 copies that exist, and there probably aren't very many on eBay at any given time. So if you were to buy this thing at auction, that's kind of your true market value. And then you put it up for a much higher buy it now and field offers. Sometimes you can influence the sale a little bit and get a buyer to stretch to pay your price if they want the card. Otherwise, they have to just not have the card because you have one of the only copies, right? So that's the power of rarity. Now, the reason I skipped this play is because I'm already well positioned on Caleb Williams cards. I bought a bunch of them 4 to 6 months ago when values were quite a bit lower across the board. So raising my cost dollar average on cards like this isn't necessarily my favorite play as we're getting closer and closer to the season. But while other people are starting to buy, that's normally when I'm starting to sell because I want to sell into the strength of that preseason hype. I typically don't like to bet on performance as much as I like to bet on who the crowd is going to be going after. And then I just get ahead of the crowd. So instead of speculating on the players, I call this speculating on the speculators. And this ultimately gives us a much safer approach to the market because we're just playing the market pattern that repeats itself year after year rather than trying to predict the future and bet a player is going to do something crazy on the field that we haven't seen them do before. That's a much harder game to play compared to just buying ahead of the crowd and then selling to the crowd before the season begins. Really good way to hit singles and doubles more consistently and occasionally a home run. But this is a controllable, learnable strategy once you understand how the pattern works. So again, seasonal swing play, a lot of power here, but it's a little late in the game to be buying for my liking anyway, so I went ahead and passed on this card. All right, last one here for today is this Yordan Alvarez says Bowman Chrome Gold Refractor Auto SGC 1010. So the reason why I like this card is Jordan has been a monster this season. He's the MVP frontrunner. He's actually stayed healthy, knock on wood, I guess, but he's a guy that's putting up ridiculous numbers across the board. And if you look at his baseball savant numbers here, he's legitimately the #1 hitter in baseball this year, and it's not really particularly close. So this gives us a pretty good feel for how Jordan is playing this season. The thing is, his values in the card market have not really kept pace with how strong his performance has been on the field. A lot of cards can still be bought at or near preseason pricing from before he had this ridiculous monster first half of the season. So to me, that's an opportunity to look at a guy and say, hey, can I buy this guy for 3 months ago's pricing, even though he's had an incredible 3 months that theoretically should have pushed his values higher? And this is exactly an example of that type of card where I'm buying this for maybe a little bit more than what it might have sold for in the preseason. But this is a gem mint RC logo gold refractor auto of a marquee player, and you usually don't see those for 3 figures. So when I set up my bid for this card, I actually didn't think I was going to win it at all, and then I won it for multiple hundreds of dollars less than I expected. So maybe I'm wrong and maybe people just don't care because he's a DH or something, but I think that this will be a pretty easy quick flip opportunity with some pretty meaningful upside if he continues to have a good second half the way his first half went. If I'm ever trying to identify whether or not a player is undervalued, it's usually looking for pricing compared to performance and saying, okay, has this guy's performance exceeded everyone's expectations, but his cards have kind of lagged behind where they haven't quite caught up yet? And that's exactly what I see in Alvarez this year. Guys, if there's one thing to take from all of this, it's never about being right every single time. And I'm sure I'll be wrong about at least 1 or 2 of these. Who knows? We'll find out, right? But a big part of winning with cards is about having a sound process behind each investment, staying disciplined, having a real thesis behind the decisions before you make them. Why do you think the card's value is going to rise? When do you think it's going to rise? And then just being willing to change course when the situation changes along the way. If you want to get better at this type of thinking, join us in Ignite. You can try it completely for free with the link in the description, but otherwise don't forget to subscribe and we will see you on the next video.